Does that make sense? Location is olfactory bulb. So where do you find the olfactory neurons? Within the olfactory bulb. So what is the purpose of the olfactory neurons? Or I mean olfactory bulb. Olfactory bulb is a site where the olfactory receptor cell synapses with olfactory neurons. Does that make sense? Okay? So, I'll come back to that. So, B. Olfactory bulb is a synaptic site for olfactory neuron with olfactory receptor cell. Does that make sense? Right? Because this neuron, which is olfactory receptor cell, synapses with olfactory neuron within the olfactory bulb. Okay. So this is olfactory receptor cell, right? Olfactory receptor cell goes all the way up and enters the olfactory bulb. Within the olfactory bulb, the olfactory receptor cell synapses with olfactory neuron. Does that make sense? Okay. It's like saying, okay, that canteen right next door. Think of that as basically olfactory bulb. Okay? You guys are basically olfactory receptor cell. You guys are section 1. Regardless if you're section 1A or 1B. You're section 1. You guys meet up with my classroom tomorrow, section 2. Okay? Where do you guys unite or come together? In the canteen. That's what's happening. Section 1 is meeting up with section 2 in the canteen. The canteen would be olfactory bulb. You guys are olfactory receptor cell. My section 2 would be olfactory neurons. Does that make sense? That's what's going on. Okay? So olfactory receptor cell synapses with olfactory neurons within the olfactory bulb. So olfactory bulb is a synaptic site for olfactory receptor cell and the neurons. Olfactory receptor cell synapses with olfactory neurons. Does that make sense? Now, do you see right here, all these olfactory neurons are giving off these axons, right? These axons come together forming cranial nerve 1. What is the cranial nerve 1? Olfactory nerve. So, axons unite forming the cranial nerve 1, which is olfactory nerve. Does that make sense? Okay. Now we're going to do taste. Nose is one of the hardest because there's too much stuff in the small area. Now, I'm simplifying the tongue in the lab. You will go more in depth. Okay? Okay. Taste. Different areas of the taste detect different chemicals. The tip. What does the tip detect? Sweetness. Okay? Sweet substance is detected at the tip of the tongue. What does the sides do? Sour and salty. Sour and salty are at your sides. And what is the back? Right here. Bitter. Okay. So sweet, sour, salty, and bitter. Okay. So bitter is in the back. Sour and salty is on your side, and sweet is on the tip of your tongue. Now, why is bitter at the back? It's a protective measure because anything that's bitter, it's harmful. So like poisons are bitter. So that's for it's in the back of the tongue to allow you, as soon as it comes with it, you could gag it out. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. Taste bud. Responsible for detecting chemicals is thousands and thousands of them on the tongue. And you will hear about capilla and everything, Dr. Yin will get into that. Okay, so now, this is one taste cell, or I mean taste bud. Okay? Here's epithelium, here's the tongue, and embedded within the tongue you have taste buds. A, which are protruding into the mouth, are actually hair cells. Okay? Which are chemoreceptors. Therefore, they detect chemicals in food and in drinks. They protrude into the mouth. Okay? So they're in the tongue protruding outward.
This was their dendrites?
Yes. B is taste cell. Okay, so B or taste cell, and their function is to release neurotransmitters. C is supporting cell. Function is supporting. Okay, they're actually the glial cells. D is basically, do you see the taste cell has a neuron to it? Okay? So this is the cell body, here's the axons. The axons come together forming a sensory nerve. Okay? So it's the axons of that nerve. Does that make sense? Easy enough? Okay. The last one we're going to talk about is ear and then the eye. Now, ear has, listen up. The ear is split up into 3 different sections. Outer ear, middle ear, and the other one has inner ear. So we'll talk about these 2 first. Outer ear. Function of the outer ear is to collect sound waves and transport or give it to middle ear. Okay? So, outer ear is supposed to collect the sound waves and give it to the middle ear. 2 structures are part of the outer ear. Enough? And auditory canal. Pinna collects the sound waves. Pinna collects the sound waves. So this is your pinna right here. Okay? This part. Auditory canal, it transports the sound waves. Transports the sound waves. The area that you're able to actually insert the Q-tip and then you're cleaning out, that's your auditory canal. Okay? And I'm going fast. It's just it's already 12:50. Okay? And I need to finish the ear with you guys. Now, the middle ear function is to amplify sound waves about 10-fold. Okay? And transports the sound waves to middle ear. To inner ear. So the main function of the middle ear is to amplify sound waves 10-fold, 7 to 10-fold, depending on the book. Okay? So amplify sound waves. is the tympanic membrane. One of the structures that makes up the middle ear is tympanic membrane. Your tympanic membrane is your eardrum. Has anybody ever seen a kite or even held a kite? Do you know how fragile the kite is? That's how your eardrum is. It's a very thin membrane. Okay, it's a very fragile membrane. Imagine it like a kite. Okay? Like a kite. Very thin, fragile membrane. Okay? Then you have bones. Within your middle ear, you have 3 bones. Okay, so you have middle ear bones. The bones go in this order. Malleus, followed by incus, followed by stapes. Okay. So within your middle ear, right after, so if this is my tympanic membrane, so here is my outer ear, here is my inner ear. Here's my tympanic membrane. This is my tympanic membrane. Right attached to it is the malleus, then you have the incus, and then you have the stapes. Okay, 3 bones. Okay, malleus looks like a hammer. Okay, stapes to me looks like an iron, but you'll see the image and we'll identify the structures. Another thing that contains within the middle ear, now this structure, some books will call it part of the middle ear, some books will kind of classify it part of the inner ear. Depending book. I'm lecturing to you, so for the lecture, I'm making it part of the middle ear. Okay? Oval window. Oval window. Again, oval window is a very thin membrane. Okay? Thin membrane. Behind, right behind the stapes. Okay? So oval window is a very thin membrane, is located right behind the stapes. Okay, the 4th one, which I can't seem to write down there, auditory tube. So there's an auditory canal, and this is an auditory tube, or eustachian tube. E-U-E-S-T-A-T-I-O-N, eustachian tube. Okay, auditory tube or eustachian tube. Have you ever been on a flight and your ear closes up? Right? What do? Don't you tend to chew on gum so your ear doesn't close up? What happens, this eustachian tube is a connection between your middle ear and the atmospheric pressure. Okay, your throat. So it connects your throat to your middle ear. And this tube opens and closes. When it opens up, it tends to equalize the pressure within the middle ear to the atmospheric pressure. So what happens when you're on a flight and when you feel like your ears closed up, that eustachian tube closed up and it doesn't open up. If it doesn't open up, that pressure that is building up inside your middle ear. And until it doesn't open, have you say, oh, my ear just popped, it meant that the eustachian tube opened up and the 2 levels equalized. If the tube doesn't open up, you will have extreme pain because the pressure just keeps on building up within your middle ear. I was going on a flight, that happened to me, okay, and my ear just would not open up. And I was like, okay, it usually never happens. And then after a couple of hours, it became so painful, and I was going to visit my boyfriend. And then I had to call my sister, okay, because she is doing residency in ER in Loma Linda. I'm like, hey, send me a prescription over right now, okay? Because I'm like, I can't handle this pain. Even one of my friends, she was just driving down the Cone Pass, and then all of a sudden, she started getting extreme pain. And she's like, calling me, and I'm like, I think this is what happened, but I'm like, I can't examine it, I don't know. And she went to the ER like a day later. They can't force it open. Okay? They can do something, but they try not to. They're like, okay, it will open up. And they just gave her like strong meds, like painkillers, because they let that open up by themselves. After a week or so, if it doesn't open up, then they will go in. But they try not to. Okay? So basically, this is another reason why if you have infection in the mouth, Why is it that it could go into your brain? Because from there it could enter your ears, and from the ears it could go into your brain. So, that was the auditory tube or the eustachian tube. Okay? Now, inner ear. Function of inner ear is to convert sound waves into action potential, into an impulse. Okay, this is where you actually have now being produced. So you have cochlea. Cochlea. Cochlea is actually a snail-like structure. Snail-like structure. This is where you have hearing being produced. Hearing occurs within the cochlea. Okay? Another function, so function of the inner ear is to convert sound waves into action potentials, therefore for hearing. Plus, another function that the inner ear has is balance. Okay? Your inner ear is also responsible for balance. So cochlea, which is snail-like structure, is responsible for hearing. Another structure we're going to talk about, vestibular apparatus. Vestibular apparatus. Vestibular apparatus is responsible for balance. Now, the vestibular apparatus is actually made up of two smaller structures. Semicircular canals, and the vestibule. So, vestibule and the semicircular canal collectively is called the vestibular apparatus, which is responsible for balance. Another thing we have in the inner ear is round window. It's round window. Now, round window is very thick membrane. It's not fragile. It doesn't vibrate or move. Okay? Thick membrane or solid. Another structure we have is the cranial nerve 8, which is what? Vestibular, cochlear nerve. Vestibular cochlear nerve. Okay? Now, the cranial nerve 8 has two segments. It has the cochlear part. It has the cochlear part, okay, and it has the vestibular. So basically, it's like saying the two branches come together forming one nerve. Does that make sense? So the vestibular nerve and the cochlear nerve, so vestibular, so the cochlear nerve and the vestibular nerve. So the vestibular nerve and the cochlear nerve will unite, forming the vestibular cochlear nerve. Does that make sense? So there are two smaller nerves that come together, forming one big nerve. Now the cochlear nerve is coming from the cochlea. The vestibular nerve is coming from the vestibular apparatus. Okay, so the vestibular nerve tends to deal with the balance. Cochlear nerve tends to deal with hearing. Vestibular cochlear nerve tend to deal with balance and hearing. Does that make sense?
So they both make a.
So the two smaller nerves come together forming one nerve called the vestibulocochlear nerve.
Are they ever separate? They're always together.
Well, they're separate right here, but when they come together, so when they're separate, they're not called vestibulocochlear nerve. It's either called cochlear nerve or the vestibular nerve. But once they unite, now it's called vestibulocochlear nerve.
Do we have to know when they're separated?
Do you have a what?
Do we have to know like when they're separated?
When? Like, what do you mean when?
And where they are?
No. But, I mean, you'll see what I mean in the photo. Okay? So, right here is the image of the ear. Here is the outer ear. And if you have printed or in this colored copy, everything is color coordinated. So, the green is the outer ear. Okay? Here's a pinna. And here's the auditory canal. Who has dogs in here? Okay. What happens sometimes when you talk to your dog? They turn and don't their ears go this way. Ooh. It's because their pinna, okay, the pinna, ours don't move, but theirs are able to flap and move. So when what they do, they turn their head towards you, their pinna comes towards that because it's trying to collect that sound waves. Okay? So, pinna and auditory canal make up your outer ear. This collects the sound waves, this transports the sound waves. Now we're in the middle ear. All the structure of middle ear is pink. So right here is the tympanic membrane. This is the eardrum. It's a tympanic membrane. As you can see, it looks very fragile. It looks like a kite. And its function is to vibrate. Then you have the three bones. The malleus, which looks like a hammer right there. Then you have the incus right here. And then you have the stapes, which looks like an iron. Okay? So the three bones. Now, this is the oval window, which you can't see it because it's behind the stapes. Okay? It's behind the stapes, which is the oval window. And then the last structure you have, which is part of the middle ear, is the auditory tube. This is the tube. As you can see, it connects the throat and the middle ear. And when this tube opens and closes, equalization of air affairs of the atmosphere. And then blue is the inner ear. Blue is the inner ear. This is the cochlea. As you can see, it looks like a snail-like structure, which is the cochlea. This, okay, is a semicircular canal. As you can see, the semicircular canals. And right here you have the vestibule. The semicircular canals, or the vestibule and the semicircular canals collectively, so this dot with the red, collectively, okay, because vestibule and the semicircular canal collectively is called vestibular apparatus. Does that make sense? Okay. Right here is the round window. And right here is the vestibulocochlear nerve. As you can see, this part of the nerve is going towards the vestibular part. This part of the nerve is going towards the cochlea. So here's the cochlear nerve, here's the vestibular nerve. The vestibular nerve, cochlear nerve unite, forming the vestibulocochlear nerve. Does that make sense? Okay? You can see where they have come together. At the point where they have united, now is the vestibulocochlear nerve. If they're branching